The Georgia offense this year, what do you think it's going to be? If you're a Georgia fan, if you're totally agnostic and you live in Stillwater, Oklahoma, but you watch Georgia because they're a big-time program, what do you think that offense is going to be this year? Georgia's got a stigma, and it's largely been earned, and that stigma has been they're a very solid program. We know they're going to be right there on National Signing Day. Seems they're going to do something to trip their own selves up. Eventually, they'll make some terrible call, or they won't have good enough quarterback play. Their offense will eventually cost them in one of the biggest moments of the season, whether it be a playoff game or an SEC championship game. That's the stigma of Georgia football. Again, that's not totally unearned. So I want to ask you, do you think it's same old this year? Or do you expect a lot more revolutionary product offensively for Georgia? I wanted to pause between the word revolutionary and the words offense in Georgia, because I really wanted to let them simmer and sizzle there for a second. These are not words that we've put in the same sentence very often. You got two schools of thought out there about Georgia right now, and there are extremes. You got one extreme over here, which is the hashtag JT for Heisman crowd, and then you got over here, the far right, you got the Kirby gonna Kirby crowd. The truth, as usual, is somewhere in the middle, but which is closer to reality? Let's dive into this. I want to tell you up front, I have little to no doubt that this Georgia coaching staff is fully committed, not to just dipping their toe in the water of revolutionizing the offense, and that is the word I'm using intentionally, revolutionizing. I don't think they're dipping their toe in. I think they're ready to totally dive in to a revolutionary offensive concept this year, which is key because I don't think they've ever been there. Now, it's partly because maybe the head coach there, Kirby Smart, just philosophically, it felt like that was oil and water compared to what he has believed in his whole life, or maybe it's because they didn't think they had the pieces, or maybe a little bit of both. But there are a few keys here, obviously. JT Daniels is key number one, so you got to have the right quarterback to run any kind of offense that you want to. Key number two is they finally have the depth and versatility at wide receiver to be able to do what you were going to expect them to do, what a revolutionary, more modernized offense would demand that you do. But number three, and I would argue maybe even important than the first two keys, is the coaching staff has to be all in on this. They got to trust that they've recruited the right pieces, and then they've got to trust the concept that we can no longer get by and achieve what we want to achieve by doing what we've done. This is really easy to say when you're sitting behind a microphone. It's so much harder to do in real life. If you're Kirby Smart, you've been brought up as a defensive guy first and foremost, and then you were at Alabama for a long time, and you watched them do it one way. About the time you hit the exit doors, about the time they started changing things around there. So you were never really on the inside of the Alabama bubble when that framework had been totally remastered. It had started, but it hadn't totally been remastered. Now it has, and now it's just a machine over there. I was doing the Dogs 24/7 podcast the other day with Jake Rowe, and we were talking about how Alabama's all of a sudden become this standard for wide receiver talent. How high would people think you are if you said that 8 or 9 years ago, when they may have had one stud receiver and then a lot of workman, journeyman types, the Nikita Stovers of the world. And all of a sudden, they're sending 4 guys in the first round over the span of 2 years. Well, that happened, obviously not overnight, but it feels like it happened overnight. And if you've watched the sport just over the last decade even, you've seen that shift. That's the kind of shift they want to see at Georgia. If you're a Georgia fan, that's the kind of shift you want to see because rightfully, understandably so, you look over there and you say, if they're doing it, why can't we do it? You're not about to tell me we can't recruit similar athletes. You're not about to tell me we're hurting for resources. We got everything that they have. And so if we're lacking, the finger is going to be pointed at the coaching staff. And I understand that, and I think it's fair. You invest fully, you expect a return on your investment. But I think they were ready last year. And this kind of bleeds into what to expect this year and why I'm so confident you're going to get what you want, or at least you're going to get a commitment to providing you what you want. I think they were committed to it last year. I think when Kirby Smart got pasted by LSU in the SEC championship game in 2019, I think he looked around, did a healthy inventory of his program, and realized what we're doing is not good enough anymore. I've seen the future. And I've seen it several times now. I've played Bama, I've played LSU, I played Oklahoma, ended up beating them, but still got a hearty taste of what that kind of new age offense is about. And we're Georgia. It's not Georgia State. We're not limited financially. We're not strapped for cash around here. We got everything the big boys have. And so we get to choose what kind of offense we run. Why not choose to run the best? We can get the best ingredients. Why don't we make the best meal possible with these ingredients? I think they were ready to do it last year. Fate dealt them a hand that made it impossible. Part of it was COVID. I think part of it was that the roster was not ready. The quarterback position was not ready. And even when JT Daniels eventually played, he wasn't ready. I had a number of my buddies last year say, well, you claim that you think they were committed to doing this year, but they had to scrap those plans. Well, now that JT Daniels is in, why don't they just reinsert that plan? Well, because it was an Xbox. You're not talking about minor changes. You're not talking about inserting a couple of pages into a play, but you're talking about a total philosophical shift, really, and you're asking them to do it in the middle of a football season. That's not something you do on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, snap your fingers on Thursday, and we're here, we're ready. That's not the way that works. But what can work is when you already got the OC in the house with 1 year's benefit, and you've already got the eventual quarterback in the house with 1 year's benefit, and a lot of the receiver talent now is acclimated, and a lot of your personnel period is acclimated. Now you get to go into 2021 with a full spring. You get to go in with a full off-summer conditioning program. JT Daniels famously took a lot of these receivers out to California because the ball just travels better in California, I'm told. But it's about cohesiveness and building chemistry. We get all that. But the number one pushback that you're going to get, especially down where I'm from in the South, if you were to present this to the Kirby Gonna Kirby crowd, the Kirby Gonna Kirby crowd is going to tell you, well, JT Daniels may not be all you think he is. And I'm going to grant you this now. A lot of these folks who are listing him as the favorite, the odds-on favorite to win the Heisman, I don't have any problem admitting to you, someone touting JT Daniels as the presumptive Heisman favorite in the preseason, I would advise to pump the brakes. I don't have any problem telling you that. I don't have any problem granting you that he may not live up to expectation. This is not some slam dunk for me. What I do think is also probably equally as possible, if not greater than equally as possible, is maybe he's a lot more than you think he is. And what this would tie into is, Georgia opened against Arkansas last year. How did JT Daniels do in that game? He didn't do anything in that game because he was not medically cleared to play. They played Bama a couple of weeks later. How did JT Daniels look in that game? He didn't look like anything. They played Florida a month later. Ditto. He didn't look like anything because their medical staff wouldn't clear him. Well, there was a reason for that. It wasn't that they were anti-JT Daniels, and so even when they did clear him, I'm not one that believes the guy was just all of a sudden magically 100%. Now, what does that mean? Well, did it mean it shaved 1.5 seconds off his 40 time? Does it mean that he lost 20% of his arm strength and he'll all of a sudden gain it back? No, but that's not the way a football game works. The way a football game works is if you're 3rd and 4 against Clemson in week 1 and you're in plus territory, you're on their 39-yard line and they're leading you 23-20, it's late third quarter, but you're driving on them, and here comes Brian Brzee off the edge and it's 3rd and 6, and you have the mobility and you have the wherewithal in the pocket and you have the physical awareness to just sidestep. And instead of sacking you, he just brushes you with his arm and you regain footing and you deliver a strike across the middle 15 yards downfield, and it's first down Georgia, and you go on to win the game because of that drive. Could you tell the difference between that person, the person capable of making that play, versus the person who gets sacked? If you were watching him work out in the summer, could you tell that person A has the ability and person B doesn't? No, it's not something that shows up like that. But in reality, that's the difference in a football game. What I'm telling you is these incremental differences in one's physical ability when being cleared but not 100% versus being closer to 100% and with an entire O-word to recuperate could make the incremental difference in what could end up being the difference in a couple of one-possession games this year. And so I'm saying all that to tell you, I think they have the tool at quarterback now, JT Daniels, along with the versatility at receiver, to do what they wanted to do last year that they now can fully commit to doing because the ingredients are in place, and unlike last year, the calendar has cooperated with them. So it won't take long. For anyone who wants to push back on that, it won't take long. I think Colin pointed out in the spring, I said something like, I think Georgia's offense is going to be top 3 in the country. Let me correct myself. When I say top 3, I don't mean top three in terms of raw statistical output. They're going to be in the top three, whether you want to go average yards per game or points per game. But I mean, from an efficiency standpoint, I think they have the top end, top five-ish potential. I think that's what they have. So that in and of itself is a very, very lofty statement, but I do not want to get boxed into this whole I predicted Georgia to be top three offensively. I know how that ends. I am normally the one pushing someone up against the wall who makes a statement like that, so I definitely don't want to be in that position.